¿Qué tal amigos de AnalizArte 83 y sean muy bienvenidos de vuelta al canal? En este caso les tengo la parte 3 del debate de cuestiones metafísicas, religiosas y algunas dudas existenciales. Si están aquí es porque ya vieron la primera parte y la segunda, si no se las dejo en la descripción. Si gustan pueden ir y si no, vamos adelante desde la parte en la que nos quedamos.
Let's move on to a question on evolution for Cardinal Peltz from Joe Blades.
As a young Catholic scientist, I'd like to ask the Cardinal to clarify the Roman Catholic Church's position on evolution and comment on whether the dichotomy between science and religion is in fact real.
Antes que el cardenal responda, hay que tener un poco de contexto acerca de esto. Y es que la religión como tal no aceptaba a la evolución, ya que tenemos a un primer hombre y a su mujer, Adán y Eva.
Well, science and religion are two different activities, and in the Catholic Church, you can believe to some extent what you like about evolution. I think Darwin made a great contribution. I remember talking with Julius Kornberg, a very distinguished biologist, and he's worked with ants for years. And he said, you know, he's managed to change them by changing the conditions. But there are a number of things that evolution doesn't explain. Darwin realized that. Darwin was a theist because he said he couldn't believe that the immense cosmos and all the beautiful things in the world came about either by chance or out of necessity. He said, I have to be ranked as a theist. Now,
so that's just not true.
Excuse me,
it's plain not true.
It's on page 92 of his autobiography. Go and have a look.
Sorry, can I just bring you, in a sense, to the point of the question? Do you accept that humans evolved from apes?
Yeah, probably. From Neanderthals, yes.
Neandertales, dice el padre. Realmente los neandertales, pues sí fueron especies que pueden ser consideradas por la evolución como primos de los seres humanos, ya que en realidad nosotros pues descendemos de otra especie, que son los Homo erectus y que después fueron Homo sapiens y así fue la sucesión evolutiva hasta llegar a nosotros. Pero los neandertales.
Whether
From Neanderthals?
Probably.
Why from Neanderthals?
Well, who else would you suggest?
Neanderthals were our cousins. We're not descended from them. And we're both descended from...
Are these extant cousins? Where will I find a Neanderthal today if they're my cousins?
They're not extant, they're extinct.
Exactly, that's my point.
Your point is that because they're not... that because they're extant, they can't be our cousins.
I really am not much fussed.
That's very clear.
Something in the evolutionary story seems to have come before humans. A lot of people say it's Neanderthal.
Can we say this? Humans, you accept that humans evolved from non-humans. So let me put this to you as a question. At what point in this evolutionary scale was a soul imparted to the humans from God?
Look, a soul isn't... it's not like...
Y esta pregunta es realmente muy difícil de responder, bueno, yo pienso para el padre, porque si hasta cierto punto la iglesia no aceptaba la evolución, esto quiere decir que estaba el primer hombre, Adán, la mujer, Eva, pues esta teoría queda muy clara, pues desde que se originó Adán y Eva, ellos tienen alma, pero en el caso de que hay una evolución, ¿en qué momento es que el alma llega a las personas? ¿O desde los Homo erectus ya tenían alma? ¿O en qué momento es que se dice, ya hay un humano, aquí ve el alma? ¿O qué es el alma en realidad para el ser humano?
Like putting a spot of gin in a tonic. The soul is the principle of life. So whenever there was a principle of life that could question, that could be open to awe, that was able to communicate, then we had the first human. Now, we believe that the first humans developed in South Africa. I'm not quite sure how long ago, and that all humans have developed from that. We know most about that. There aren't remains. We know most about that because of the drawings they left on walls and caves and that sort of thing. No such thing from so we can't say exactly when there was a first human, but we have to say if there are humans, there must have been a first one. There might have been equal first, but if there is a progression, there's got to be first.
So are you talking about a kind of Garden of Eden scenario with an actual Adam and Eve?
Well, what Adam and Eve terms, what do they mean?
Y aquí es donde entra la metáfora de Adán y Eva.
And earth. It's like every man. That's a beautiful, sophisticated, a mythological account. It's not science, but it's there to tell us two or three things. First of all, that God created the world and the universe. Secondly, that the key to the whole of the universe, the really significant thing, are humans. And thirdly, it's a very sophisticated mythology to try to explain the evil and the suffering
But
of
it
the
isn't a
world.
literal truth. You shouldn't see it in any way as being an historical or literal truth.
It's certainly not a scientific truth, and it's a religious story told for religious purpose.
Como la mayoría de los relatos de la iglesia.
And just quickly, because the Old Testament in particular is full of these kind of stories. I mean, is there a point where you distinguish between metaphor and reality? For example, Moses receiving the Ten Commandments inscribed directly by God on a mountain.
I'm not sure that the Old Testament says that God inscribed the Ten Commandments, but leaving that aside, it's difficult to know how exactly that worked, but Moses was a great man. There was a great encounter with the divine. Actually, with Moses, we get the key that enables us to come together with the Greeks with reason, because Moses said, "Who will I tell the Egyptians?" And he said, "Tell that my name is I am who I am."
Okay, I'm going to bring Richard Dawkins back in here because we've moved from evolution, obviously, to the biblical versions of it. Your response?
Well, I'm curious to know if Adam and Eve never existed, where did original sin come from? But I also would like to clarify the point about whether there ever was a first human. That's a rather difficult and puzzling question, because we know that the previous species from which we're descended is probably Homo erectus, and before that some sort of Australopithecine. But there never was a last Homo erectus who gave birth to the first Homo sapiens. Every creature ever born belonged to the same species as its parents. The process of evolution is so gradual that you can never say, aha, now suddenly we have the first human. It was always a case of just a slightly different from the previous generation. That's a scientific point, which I think is quite interesting. I'm not sure if it has a theological significance, except that I think successive popes have tried to suggest that the soul did indeed get added, rather like gin to tonic, at some particular point during evolution, at some point in...
Y aquí reafirma la parte que mencioné con anterioridad. Si en realidad estas son metáforas aplicadas con fines benéficos para la iglesia, entonces, ¿en qué punto está la realidad de todo lo que están diciendo? ¿O con qué propósito real se está dando?
Evolution, there was no soul, and then later there was one. So it is quite an interesting question to ask. Now we have rather a good fossil record from Africa of the descent of humans, from Australopithecines to various species of Homo, perhaps Homo habilis, perhaps Homo erectus, then archaic Homo sapiens, and then modern Homo sapiens. At what point did the soul get injected? And what does the idea of original sin mean if Adam and Eve never existed?
I'll just quickly let you respond to that.
Yeah, well, I mean, God wasn't running around giving injections. And if there is no first person, we're not humans.
Where did the soul come from then?
The soul
in
is
the
a
point
principle of
evolution?
life.
But
There are animal souls.
Do jellyfish?
All living things have some principle of life. An animal has a principle of life.
Entonces aquí nos encontramos con otra metáfora, ya que todas las personas y todos los seres vivos tienen un principio en la vida. Otra metáfora.
Human has a soul, a principle of life, which is immensely more sophisticated. We even have a voice box, which is one of the great miracles, so that we can communicate our thoughts to one another rather than just grunting.
I'm pleased we're not grunting tonight. Let's move along. You can, by the way, don't forget you can still vote.
Bueno, amigos de AnalizArte 83, hasta aquí dejaremos esta tercera parte. Espero que les esté gustando esta miniserie. Recuerden estar atentos a las redes sociales del canal para que sepan cuándo es que se sube la siguiente parte. Así que nos vemos en el siguiente video.